What's up, Chicago? Happy Saturday night. It's Sports Talk Chicago with Joey Christopoulos right here on WLS AM 890. In today's episode, I'm going to give you what I am looking for, what I need to see in 2025 from all of our Chicago sports teams. And also, I'm going to play a little game of fact or fiction with Chicago Bears quarterback Caleb Williams. So without further ado, let's get to today's episode. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for tuning in early to an episode of Sports Talk Chicago. Hope you had a wonderful holiday week as we round out 2024 and sprint into 2025. So what I want to do with my first segment here is I want to go through each Chicago sports team and give you just one or two things that I am looking for, something that I want to see from each of our Chicago sports teams heading into 2025. Because let's be honest, in 2024, it's dismal, it's brutal, it's sad, and Chicago sports fans, we simply do not deserve it. So we're going to go one at a time here. Probably going to end with our Chicago Bears. But first, I want to start with our Chicago White Sox. That's right. For once in a while, the Chicago White Sox are going to go first. And the one thing that I want to see from this team, and it's not going to be winning ball games, because I hate to break it to you, in 2025, they're not going to win many of them. Hopefully they don't lose 121 games, but it might be close to 105 or 110. It's going to hurt and it's going to be painful. But when we look at new manager Will Venable, there is one thing that I am looking for with our White Sox team in 2025. And I need Will Venable to raise the baseline on the current roster of talent that we have right now. There are several players on this team that are wildly underperforming. Now, when I talk about these players, I'm not saying that these guys are going to be a part of our future. And in fact, I hope that they have better performances in 2025 so general manager Chris Getz can then trade those players, bring in some younger talent, and continue to stock up the farm system. But as we wait for some of these young kids to come along, and we're in this holding pattern where we're building up the farm system and hopefully seeing some progression from some of these players, some of these guys that have been around here, they definitely need to improve. And I'm hoping that Venable gets that out of these players. Did you know that the Chicago White Sox last season, in the throes of losing 121 games, they did not have a single player with an OPS plus over 99? For those of you tuning into past episodes, that is not a league average player. If you want a comparable, Kyle Tucker's in the 130, 140 range. Ian Happ, Seiya Suzuki in this town, get you anywhere between 120, 130 OPS plus. The Chicago White Sox did not have one player over 99 in their lineup last year. Excluding Tommy Pham, they only had one player with an on-base percentage over 300. And White Sox fans, think about it like this. Frank Thomas made it a habit, made a career out of getting on base 40% of the time, 45% of the time. We do not have one single player that was on base over 30% of the time last year with a minimum 100 at bats. And we're excluding Tommy Pham, who's traded, who's by far our best player. The team high in runs batted in was only 70. We did not have one player with an OPS, which is on-base percentage plus slugging, over 699. The league average is 734. On the other side of town, that's numbers that Jason Hayward would put up. So they have a below-average lineup, 1 through 9. No way, no doubt about it. No way, other way to slice it. So what I'm looking for is development on some guys that are already on this team. And the first one that I'm starting with is Andrew Vaughn. Now, if you look at Andrew Vaughn, his numbers are down across the board. He was your RBI leader with 70 runs batted in, 19 home runs. But slugging percentage down, on base percentage down, batting average down. This was a guy coming out of college, a top 5 pick, a surefire hitter, who was lauded as a guy that knew how to control the zone. A guy that knew how to take a pitch from time to time. Where is that player? And I'm not trying to say that Will Venable is going to turn Andrew Vaughn into a 30 home run hitter all of a sudden. But can we get him up from the 240 hitter with 19 home runs and 70 RBIs? Can we get him up to a 260, 25 home runs, maybe lead the team in 80-ish RBIs? Can we build up some value with Andrew Vaughn where maybe we can make a decision and say, hey, we want to build with this guy moving forward? Or, hey, we need to move on from this guy. And can we get a certain amount of production out of him to then facilitate a trade to get some sort of value back? That is the job of Will Venable next year. It's not to win games. It's to increase the stock price of some guys that are already on this team. And speaking of stock crashes, Andrew Benintendi. 91 OPS plus in 2 seasons with the Chicago White Sox, an average of 109 OPS plus everywhere else, every single other stop in his career. And he still has multiple years left on his deal. I'm not insinuating that it's going to be easy or that actually MLB teams are going to be interested in trading for Andrew Benintendi. But this is another task of Will Venable that I want to see. Can he put his fingerprints on this team and get more out of these types of players? It was nice to see Benintendi get a little bit of the slug back into his game, hit 20 home runs last year. But overall, it's been bleak. Andrew Benintendi, that signing, has also plummeted the White Sox. They're both going in the same direction, downwards. And can they bring them back up? That is the big question. And then the other one is Luis Robert. And I don't think if Luis Robert has a bounce back year that we're going to be able to credit Will Venable with all of that. Luis Robert has already proven himself to be an all-star caliber player, offensively and defensively. Last year, ho-hum, what new, injuries for Luis Robert, but then when he came back, he was one of the worst offensive hitters in the league. And it looks like whatever joy, inspiration, enthusiasm he had for playing the game of baseball evaporated last year. He was 1-2-3 Cancun from the moment that he came back from injury and never turned back. I don't see Luis Robert in our future plans of when the Chicago White Sox are ready to be competitive again. I'll be honest, I don't see Luis Robert in our lineup. So can we get him back to being the player that he was? A player that is a 3 wins over replacement player, 4, 5 number, something along those lines. Because we got to pump up his trade value. I don't think they should trade him over the winter because I don't think they're going to get the significant, substantial return that I think they probably deserve to get if they were to trade a Luis Robert. It is a buy low right now for whoever would be interested in his services. And they got to move that stock price up. So there are pieces on this team that I don't think are going to make the Chicago White Sox competitive now. But if Will Venable can get the most and extract the most production out of them, they can be useful pieces to be trade chips later on this summer. And I know it's a sad way to think about it. And I'm not this type of guy. I want to try and win every single year. But Chris Getz, with a bullhorn, has screamed it at you, White Sox fans, that he's not interested in competing this year, and he might not even be interested in competing the next year. So I'm trying to find the best way to spin this forward and find some optimism here. And for me, it's some of these existing guys on the team need to move up their production value so that they either can stick around for a couple years while we go through this transition or be trade pieces for substantial income coming back. When we talk about some of the younger players in the team, I mean, it's a story, it's a tale as old as time. You know, Will Venable is going to be in charge of creating a development program with a lot of these guys. You know, can Corey Lee become the number 1 catcher behind the plate? Can Edgar Caro come up after an impressive season in the minors and begin to produce at the major league level? Kyle Teal, who they just got in the trade, moving on with the Boston Red Sox for Garrett Crochet, can he come up maybe by the end of the season and become a piece, or is he more of a 2026 guy? And they've got some pitching for sure. Noah Schultz, Hagen Smith, that headlines a list of guys that got a taste last year. Kai Busch, Nick Mastrini, Drew Thorpe, who had surgery for bone spurs. He should be ready by spring training. These are all trade pieces. These are all prospects. These are all guys drafted that hopefully are going to be a part of a rotation or a pitching mix for the White Sox in the next couple of years when hopefully, fingers crossed, they want to be competitive again. Another guy that's intriguing to me is Jonathan Cannon, and I think this is where Will Venable can come into play here. where you're coming in as a manager. Jonathan Cannon made 23 starts last year, got his head kicked in almost on the regular. Put in some quality starts. And we've seen this with guys like John Garland before. Lucas Giolito as well. Can those types of performances, are those learning experiences at the major league level that you can eventually translate into success and consistent results? That's what I want to see from Will Venable. Not worried about wins and losses. I'm looking about development of guys that are already on the roster. And some of these guys are veterans too as well. And that's going to be a big indicator to me whether Will Venable should be the type of player, or the manager that should stick around. Moving on next, I'm just throwing out one thing that I want to see from each of our Chicago sports teams in 2025. You're listening to Sports Talk Chicago right here on WLS AM 890. For the Chicago Cubs, this one is simple. Playoffs. That's what I want to see in 2025. I want the Chicago Cubs back in the playoffs. When Jed Hoyer traded the Cubby core, and in hindsight, looks like the right move, little did we know that it was going to be 2025 before the Chicago Cubs were going to be able to even put themselves in a position to re-enter the playoff mix. 83 wins isn't going to cut it. Competitive, sure. Were we looking at the standings in September? Yes. But this is the year. Craig Counsell, you paid $40 million for him. You just traded for Kyle Tucker. You should not be, by any stretch of the imagination, done acquiring players, closer, starting pitcher, maybe a little more hitting. But in 2025, for me, the Chicago Cubs, the one thing I want to see is I want to see October baseball. And I want to see them competing. I'm not going to go as far as to say they're going to win the National League, because we all know a certain team called the Los Angeles Dodgers are there. We also know Juan Soto is now a New York Met. The Philadelphia Phillies, pretty darn good team. But in the NL Central, the one thing I want to see from the Chicago Cubs is the playoffs. And trust me, here on Sports Talk Chicago, we're going to be talking more about the Cubs offseason all the way leading up towards spring training. But that's the one thing I want to see from them. Moving on to the next team, the Chicago Blackhawks. What is the one thing I want to see from the Chicago Blackhawks in 2025? It isn't something specific. It's just a phrase. I need to see this organization get serious. This is a game that in many sports, front office people, general managers will try and play with a fan base. They will sell you on the depth and the deep pool of prospects and talent that they have coming up. And just you wait, a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, we will be reaping the benefits of our deep, talented prospect pool. Now, I want to give the Blackhawks a little bit of credit. They gave Bertuzzi money. They gave Teravainen money. Not huge, but they try to get a little bit more respectable at the professional level. But the Chicago Blackhawks need to start going about this a totally different way. And I don't think that there's an easy answer to this. Look, they have Seth Jones on the team making $9.5 million right now. And for those of you not too familiar with NHL money and contracts, $9.5 million is the cream of the crop. That is the very top. They're paying him as if he is one of the best defensemen in all of the NHL. And he's a good player, but he's certainly not the best. He's certainly not worth Patrick Kane money or Jonathan Taves money, Sidney Crosby money. That's what they're paying him right now. That contract's tough. But moving forward, in 2025, they have $28 million in cap space. 2026, $62 million in cap space. 2027, $68 million in cap space. They're keeping the powder dry. In theory, they're setting themselves up to hopefully have one or two of these kids hit, and then come up and then actually spend some serious dollars in the open market to bring in some legit talent to pair with Connor Bedard. And if you've seen, the Blackhawks are once again this year one of the worst teams in the NHL, and Connor Bedard has regressed. Almost a point per game player, but let's be honest, we need to see more from him, and I'm questioning whether the pieces around him are the right mix to have him take another step in his NHL career. They keep messing with his line. They don't know who to play with him right now. So until that gets fixed, this Blackhawks franchise needs to get serious. If you truly believe that Connor Bedard is a once-in-a-generation type talent, a guy who's going to turn into a Connor McDavid, every single season is precious. You can't kick it down. You know, you can't clear the puck down the ice like a power play and hope in 3 or 4 years from now all these kids hit and your cap space looks amazing and all of a sudden you start winning games. You have to be proactive. You have to be aggressive. And for the Chicago Blackhawks, they need to get serious fast because they are a terrible hockey team. They thought they were going to be a little bit better this year after being, again, the worst hockey team in the NHL. The results haven't been there. And they got to change something. And they got to change it fast. Playing Frank Nazar, great idea. Hopefully he produces. But, man, they need to start putting an actual plan into place of getting as competitive as they can to accelerate Connor Bedard's talents and provide as much of a window for winning in Connor Bedard's career as you possibly can. Otherwise, you're just sitting around waiting for these guys, these little chickadee prospects to hatch, and it may never happen for you. Got to use that money, got to use that cap space moving forward. Moving on here to the Chicago Bulls. Right here on WLS AM 890 Sports Talk Chicago, we're talking what each sports team needs to do, what I want to see from them in 2025. For the Chicago Bulls, it's pretty simple. I think they need to pick a lane. We've been saying this for years. And they also need a new front office. The Arturas Karnisovas era, it has not yielded any result. It's yielded plenty of bubble play-in games. Is that what the Chicago Bulls are after? I don't know. Ask the front office. But the Chicago Bulls deserve better, and they need to pick a lane. And honestly, I think there's only one lane they can pick because the other lane has so much construction on it and so much debris that I don't even think they can go down that road. The one with construction and debris is to somehow continue to try and compete. They don't have the cap space for it, and the money that they've invested in the players that they currently have, we've already tried this for a couple seasons. It ain't getting there. It ain't happening. Zach LaVine is not going to be the type of player that's going to lead you on a deep playoff run. So the other lane is obvious. I think Vucevic is having an excellent season, and I think he's definitely going to be able to get traded. They have to do the best they can to get the most return that they possibly can, and hopefully it involves draft picks and not players, and you're not just swapping out contracts and money. And somehow, some way, they have to find a team to take Zach LaVine's deal, and then they need to tank. They need to lose some games. This happens in the NBA. You could talk about the NBA as a principled structure and why that doesn't work and why that doesn't make any sense all you want to. But I'm just telling you that this is the path that the Chicago Bulls need to take if they have any interest in the next 4 or 5 years of being competitive. Now, granted, when you get rid of these players and you get bad and you're hoping the lottery balls bounce your way, 4 or 5 years from now, you could be in the same spot. You could be just as terrible. Up a creek without a paddle. But this is the risk that they have to take. And it's the perfect opportunity, in my opinion, to move in a new direction. If I was running the Chicago Bulls, I think the only trade that you probably could allow them to pull off would be the Vucevic trade. I just don't think Zach LaVine's going to have enough suitors to get something of quality in return. And besides, you want whoever you bring in, whoever you hire next to maybe make that decision so they're happy with the commodities that come back. But the Chicago Bulls need to pick a lane because the lane that they're in right now is not leading towards victories, and it's not leading towards sustained success, not leading towards deep playoff runs. The NBA is a tough business. If you do not have a star, if you do not have a top 10 player, you are not in the mix. It just ain't happening. And the Chicago Bulls tried to do it a different way with depth. It didn't work out. It's now time to pivot and try and get yourself back into position to hopefully land a player that could become a top 10 player. This is something I wanted them to do with the Wembanyama situation when he was coming into the draft. They had the opportunity to do it then. They decided to punt on that. They were fine and content winning 38 to 42 games, getting waxed by Milwaukee in the first round and moving on. At least we can say to ourselves that we tried to do that and it failed. And for Arturas Karnisovas, I think the only way to preserve your job is to probably gut the thing and try and sell the front office and ownership that you're at least charting a path that can be new and exciting for Bulls fans. Because as of right now, a couple games under 500, they're not good enough to really make a serious playoff run or even be in the top 6 in the playoffs. Definitely not that. They're definitely a bubble team at best. And at worst, maybe they just miss the playoffs, but then they get to pick 7th or 8th in a draft. There are 3 or 4 legitimate NBA impact players right now that are going to be in the draft next year. And as we go through the tournament, 1 or 2 guys always pop up. It happens every single year. So the Bulls need to pounce on this opportunity. You don't necessarily need the number 1 pick to get a real deal impact player onto your team for next year. You somehow just got to get into that top 4. But the only way to get in that top 4 is you got to start losing some games. And I think the only way that you're going to be able to do that is you got to trade Vucevic, hopefully trade Zach. I still think you can lose a lot of games with Zach. That's my personal opinion. But they need to chart a new path, and they need to pick a lane. I also think ownership needs to bring in a new front office and a new general manager. I'm not going to get my hopes up on that one, but please, Chicago Bulls, pick a lane. Let's move on to the Chicago Bears here before we take a break here in Sports Talk Chicago with Joey Christopoulos right here on WLS AM 890. Just do a quick rundown of what we've had. We've had the Cubs. Got to make the playoffs. White Sox, I want to see baseline of production on the rise with the current roster constituted, not with the prospects. Blackhawks, I need them to get serious. Bulls, I need them to pick a lane. And the Chicago Bears. You're going to think I'm going to say head coach, general manager. You got to get it right. You want me to say it because that's what everyone in town is thinking. But you know what? In 2025, because let's be honest, in this town, we haven't seen a good general manager here in about 12 or 13 years, and we haven't seen a good head coach here in debatably 12 or 14 years. So I'm going to skip that one, actually. The one thing, you know what the one thing I want to see for the Chicago Bears in 2025? Fix the lines. Fix the defensive line. Fix the offensive line. We've had good defensive lines before, so I'm going to prioritize offensive line first and foremost. I'm not getting off this one, people. For you returning listeners, thank you for supporting. But over the summer, my biggest concern, when we were talking about all the shiny objects and all the weapons that Caleb Williams had to play with, my biggest concern was the offensive line. Coleman Shelton. Is Nate Davis serious about playing? Is Braxton Jones strong enough? Can Tevin Jenkins stay healthy? Can Darnell Wright take the next step? I don't think we can say any of those worked out. I don't think we could say yes to any of those questions. And then during the season, if you've been tuning in, thank you for returning. I've detailed how the Chicago Bears historically, as a franchise, do not allocate dollars to the offensive line position. The most they've ever given a player is Cody Whitehair, 5 years, $50 million. They eventually had to eat some of that money, but he was a Pro Bowl player during that contract and before it. They gave money to Kyle Long. Their offensive linemen making serious buku bucks, and the Chicago Bears have never played in those deep waters. They've tried to do it through the draft, too, as well. We've gone through it. Gabe Crimeny, Mark Colombo, Chris Williams, all of them got hurt. All of them didn't work out. But I need to see resources in the draft and in free agency, a concerted effort to fix the offensive line and fix the defensive line for the Chicago Bears. Offensive line-wise, I think you need 4 new guys. Braxton Jones just broke his ankle. They say he's going to be ready for training camp. That's great. That's good news. But Tevin Jenkins, I can't trust him. Maybe bring him back on a short-term deal. I'm not guaranteeing him the starting position. Coleman Shelton, you are not our center, sir. Nate Davis, no longer on the team. Need a new right guard. I think Darnell Wright's the only guy that you roll in with heading into next year. And as much as I want to say, man, a head coach is going to solve everything, whether you're an offensive-minded Ben Johnson guy or whether you're a defensive-minded Mike Vrabel guy, I'm with you that the head coach is definitely going to make a huge impact on this team. But regardless of whether it's door number 1 or door number 2, the one thing that I want the Chicago Bears to do is fix the offensive line. Protect Caleb Williams. Give him an opportunity. Get some of the edge and feistiness back into the running game. We need to be tone setters on both sides of the ball. And right now we are tone deaf on both sides of the ball. And it's just a fact. We can't stop the run. We don't intimidate anybody. And offensively, we're having a hard time protecting our rookie quarterback. We've given up 60 sacks this season. I'm not going to sit here and say that's all on the offensive line. Some of it is on Caleb Williams, and we're going to get to that in part 2 of our episode here on Sports Talk Chicago with Joey Christopoulos and WLS AM 890. But you can bring in whatever head coach you want. You can bring in Vince Lombardi. You could bring in George Halas. The one thing I want to see for the Chicago Bears in 2025 is they have to fix their lines, fix the offensive line, get some teeth under the defensive line. If we can at least do that, we can at least start building a foundation for consistent football here in this town. Because we could have the best coaches come in from all across the country. If we don't have talent on those two lines, something that Ryan Poles, general manager, has neglected every single season he has been general manager here, we're going to continue to see the same results, in my opinion. Until you fix that offensive line, this thing is going nowhere. Caleb Williams ain't going nowhere. Ben Johnson's offense isn't going nowhere. This team is going nowhere. So that's what I want to see, and that's what I'm hoping for in 2025. Coming back to Sports Talk Chicago here on WLS AM 890. I am Joey Christopoulos. Hope you're having a wonderful Saturday. Hope you had a great holiday week. In part 1 of our 1-hour installment today, we talked about the one thing that I want to see from each of our Chicago sports teams heading into 2025. I want to keep going on the Chicago Bears talk here for our second part, and I am going to finish with a bit of a PSA to everyone out there that enjoys and ingests sports media, but I'll get there in a second. I want to talk a little bit about Caleb Williams, our rookie quarterback, heading into this final stretch here in the regular season. Now, to be very fair, because this is a holiday, and I do have to get this episode in on time because everyone is trying to enjoy their holiday with their friends and family, this actually is being recorded before the Seattle Seahawks game on Thursday. But this is a big picture conversation that I want to have about Caleb Williams in general. And we're going to play a little fact or fiction with Caleb. Because I can already see this happening here in Chicago. And this is a loyal sports town, but I got to be honest, this is a frustrated sports town, and I feel like that we're a little confused, and I think we're a little mixed up in these parts. And if we're going to dig ourselves out of this hole, no matter which team you're rooting for, we got to recalibrate and we got to focus here a little bit. Because I already see some of these narratives starting to seep in with our rookie quarterback. And these same narratives were pinned onto past quarterbacks. And I'm starting to feel a little bit like these narratives are creeping back up because they're easy, they're convenient. We've seen them before, therefore we're trying to now put them onto a new player. Now, for those of you turning in for the first time, or if you're coming back, thank you so much for coming back. But I am a Caleb Williams fan. And from what I've seen this season, I am optimistic about the future. But there are a lot of narratives that are being spun out there already. Narratives that really make me scratch my head, because this is what we do in sports in general, in my opinion, is that for those of you that follow it on the daily and consume sports information, we talk all summer long about X, Y, and Z. And for some reason, once the games start, once the results start piling in, we immediately abandoned some of the things that we agreed upon and understood heading into the season. We abandoned them by midseason. And all of a sudden, people start pointing fingers. And when it comes to Caleb Williams, I'm not willing to do it yet. I have said passionately and confidently that rookie quarterbacks, new quarterbacks heading into their second year, you need to give these guys at least 30 NFL starts before you start making proclamations one way or the other. As of right now, I'm leaning towards Caleb Williams is going to be good. But I'm not going to be leaning great, awesome, Pro Bowl. He could still not work out. I'm also not going to sit here and allow people to say that Caleb is already a bust with some of the other elements and issues going on with this football team this season that need to get addressed in the offseason. So I'm going to try and go through a couple of these here and see if we can kind of get off of some of this revisionist history, some of this posturing that's going on with Bears fans, with some people in the media about Caleb Williams moving forward. Because we have to keep an objective eye. And this is a guy who could have a bright future, could maybe not be the answer here in Chicago. But how do we calibrate and look at this with clear eyes moving forward into a season after this season was as disappointing and depressing a Bears season that I can remember in my recent existence as a Bears fan? I know some of you guys out there got more on me. I'm sitting at about 35 years. I know a lot of people listening, you got more on me, so I'm not going to push back on that. So let's get into it here. Play a little game called Fact or Fiction. The first one is, and we've been seeing this recently because this past weekend, Jaden Daniels threw for 5 touchdowns. He beat the Philadelphia Eagles. And this obviously opens up the door for people to go out there and say that the Chicago Bears should have taken Jaden Daniels over Caleb Williams. I'm here to tell you that that is absolute fiction, and here's why. We have to think about some of the things that we said and some of the things that smart NFL people, scouts, intel, reporters, opposing GMs said about these two quarterbacks heading into the league, and this is what it was. Now, Caleb had all the talent in the world, and that's why people thought that he was the number one pick. But some things that were going in the favor of Jaden Daniels were these. Jaden Daniels has played more college football than Caleb Williams. People said that Jaden Daniels was more NFL ready and more polished and proven. Now, does Caleb Williams have a higher ceiling? Does he have better arm talent? And all those things off script that make NFL scouts drool? Absolutely. But at the same time, we can chew gum and walk at the same time. That Jaden Daniels was consensus known to be a little bit more NFL ready because he was older, had played more in college, and was a little bit more polished and ready to roll. For those of you that forgot last year, I had a former director of personnel from the Chicago Bears, Josh Lucas, on my show. Josh Lucas actually threw out there, which I thought was a bit absurd at the time, that he could see a scenario where he thought it might benefit a player like Caleb Williams coming from the USC Trojan Pac-12 program to maybe sit for a year and learn the way that Aaron Rodgers and Patrick Mahomes did. People laughed at him. People scoffed. I'm not saying that he was right, but he was saying that I think there needed to be some training wheels or maybe a little bit of a caution with Caleb Williams. So, ipso facto, if you're going to sit here and say that you should have taken Jaden Daniels over Caleb Williams right now today, you are missing the conversation and missing the point that we had over the offseason. Of course, Jaden Daniels, it was possible for him to either have more productive results at the NFL level or maybe even have a better rookie season than Caleb Williams because Jaden Daniels was more ready. And if you look at it, let's be honest here, it's not that different. Jaden Daniels has 22 passing as of taping this today. Jaden Daniels has 22 passing touchdowns. Caleb Williams, heading into the Thursday night game against Seattle, we'll see where he ends up as sitting at 19. Caleb Williams has thrown less interceptions than Jaden Daniels. Now, Jaden Daniels has a little bit more rushing yards and more rushing touchdowns. Caleb Williams doesn't necessarily have that in the red zone. But the numbers aren't that different. So to sit here and say right now, in this moment, that Jaden Daniels is always going to be a better quarterback than Caleb Williams and the Bears should have taken him first overall is missing some of the conversation that we had last offseason. We need to remember some of those things and recalibrate and say to ourselves, well, it is possible that Caleb Williams might take a little bit more time at the NFL level. Personally, on another subject too as well, when it comes to Jaden Daniels, I still question and I have a little bit of a worry in terms of concern when it comes to his frame and whether he's going to be able to stay long-lasting healthy in the NFL. Don't wish injury upon anyone, but he is a skinny gentleman, and that concerned me and that worried me. And in many ways, Jaden Daniels' skill set was very similar to Justin Fields, other than he was a better passer, but way skinnier. Not quite as tough and thick if he was going to take some hits running the football. So if you're telling me last offseason, there's a good chance Jaden Daniels is going to be more polished and NFL ready, and he's maybe having a better season than Caleb Williams, are you really going to be that surprised? And is it really the pox on Caleb that some people are trying to make it out to be? I think, personally, that's a fiction. The next one is the obvious one. We do it all the time here in Chicago, and it really, really, really drives me nuts. Caleb Williams is a losing quarterback, quote unquote. Why? Because we have a losing record. This is fiction on so many different levels. The first one is hopefully Caleb has a long, wonderful career and has plenty of opportunities to become a winning quarterback. The other one is, for those of you writing those comments, and please, if you're watching on YouTube right now with our channel and not just listening on WLS AM 890, our wonderful radio station broadcasting Sports Talk Chicago, drop in the comments here if you've actually been watching the games, if you think Caleb is a losing quarterback. Find me a moment in the second half of games where Caleb Williams lost the game for his team. Are you going to play that game with the Detroit Lions game when everyone on the planet knew that the head coach should have called the timeout and that probably wasn't on your 23-year-old rookie quarterback, where honestly, really anyone could have called a timeout? Does that really come down to Caleb Williams? I get it. They've had slow starts in the first half. That part is fact. Can't get around that. But Caleb is a losing quarterback. Here we go. They just did that to Justin Fields. Ryan Poles purposefully tried to lose in Justin Fields' first full season. The half season with Matt Nagy, that was a ship that was sinking. And then last year, look, Justin wasn't up to snuff. I'm not going to shirk that or hide from that. But also baked into that pie is them losing 3 10-point fourth quarter leads. Them blowing the lead against the Denver Broncos when Justin Fields was shredding that team at the time. I don't mean to keep bringing up that name. It could be triggering for people. You know, Jay Cutler, losing quarterback, was 51-51 as a quarterback. Well, if you go back to a time when he was 29 years old, coming off a 2011 season where they win 10 games with Lovie Smith, at the time, he was a winning quarterback in Chicago. He was a losing quarterback with Mark Trestman. So how are we going to make these declarations and these determinations on Caleb Williams when we got to really read in between the lines on this one and look for the definition? Are you really telling me that the biggest problem with the Chicago Bears this season was Caleb Williams? It wasn't, say, the general manager's arrogance in not adjusting the offensive line for the third straight season as general manager? Are you going to tell me it wasn't maybe a defensive line that doesn't get enough pressure? Are you going to maybe tell me it was Oh, I don't know. The offensive coordinator that they fired halfway through the season. Could you tell me maybe it's the head coach that they fired a couple weeks after that? Can you tell me maybe also that there might be some dysfunction and some issues with the front office and ownership? Do you think any of those things contribute to losing? I certainly think they do. So yes, Caleb Williams has to wear some of the failures and disappointments of this season. But to call him a losing quarterback, it's fiction. I'm going to do a fact because I want to be objective and fair. Does Caleb Williams need to get better at downfield passing? That is a stone cold fact. And to be honest with you, as I'm defending Caleb Williams through much of this segment, I'm going to be critical of him too as well because, look, I'm a Chicago Bears fan first, Caleb Williams fan second, third, fourth, whatever. I want the Bears to win games, playoff games, and win a Super Bowl. I don't care who the quarterback is. I would like it to be Caleb Williams because I think he's very talented. But when it comes to his downfield passing, it is a fact that it needs to improve. It needs to improve quickly and by a substantial margin. He isn't just missing people. He's overshooting them by 5, 7, 8 yards in a lot of these situations. And it's great to see him hit a couple more in the second half of this year, but this has been a consistent issue from week one. And there is no way that Caleb Williams doesn't reach the heights of his talent or where he wants to go in the NFL or the Chicago Bears unless he starts figuring that part out. And I can't even sit here and blame a wide receiver, ran the wrong route, maybe slowed down, didn't catch a pass. There's some situations, these balls just straight up aren't catchable. It's atrocious. So if we're going to play fact or fiction with Caleb here, one of the facts is that the downfield passing needs to improve. It needs to improve quickly. Again, I'm giving this guy 30 starts. It's my arbitrary number. I made it up for myself. If you want to do 28, knock yourself out. You want to do 35, that's fine. I'm doing 30. But moving forward, it's got to change. It's got to get better. It's got to be one of the singular focuses of his offseason is getting better at that deep ball because it has been brutal. But another fact, whether we like it or not, and this is a low bar, or in another case, if this was a limbo bar, it'd be above my eyebrows right now. Is Caleb Williams the best rookie quarterback in Bears history? It's a fact. It's a fact. And look, I don't even know if that's an endorsement for Caleb Williams. It feels a bit passive-aggressive. Because in this town, let's be real, with mine own eye, we've rarely seen great quarterback play here in Chicago. To the point where I think every Chicago Bears fan should question, do we actually really know what great quarterback play is? Because when we put our passion and our heart into something, we've never seen it on a week-to-week basis in a Bears uniform. We had to go watch other teams be great. It's not the same feeling. It's hard to decipher and describe. But Caleb Williams has been the best rookie quarterback in Bears history. He walked into the Seattle game 6th in most passing yards in Bears franchise history. 6th. Jay Cutler's got a bunch of those. Eric Kramer at the top. By the end, he'll easily be in the top 5 if he isn't already there by the time of this taping. Probably won't get to Eric Kramer's record. Outside shot at maybe number 2. But he's the best rookie quarterback in Bears history. The answer is a fact. Touchdown to interception ratio is there. The passing yards is there. You want to play a little game of the eye test. I think he's further along in his progression than Justin Fields was, than Mitch Trubisky was, than Cade McNown was, than even Rex Grossman. I think that there's more trust right now in Caleb Williams than they ever had in Rex Grossman. And let's be honest, physical traits that Kyle Orton had kind of prohibited him from probably hitting this ceiling. And he is, if you looked up game manager in a dictionary, that's what you're going to see. You're going to see Kyle Orton. But is Caleb Williams the best rookie quarterback in Bears history? The answer is a fact. You're listening to Sports Talk Chicago with Joey Christopoulos here on WLS AM 890. Hope you're having a wonderful Saturday. Hope you're having a great holiday as we cruise our way into 2024. Looking big picture things right now at the Chicago Bears. Playing a little game of fact or fiction with Caleb Williams. Couple more here. Chicago Bears heading into the Seattle game. I'm sure the number is higher by now by the time of this recording. Chicago Bears has given up 60 sacks as a team. If you're not an NFL fan, I got news for you. That's a lot. And my phrase is the 60 sacks are explicitly Caleb Williams' fault. Fiction. With a caveat. Some people think that he's holding on to the ball too long, that he's running himself into sacks. There's a partial truth there where, yes, in some moments, including the Minnesota game, after heroically tying the game, taking the team to overtime, getting the football on 3rd and down, held the ball too long, took an unnecessary sack, lost some yards. There's been also moments where he's taken sacks that have taken points or field goals off the board. But all the 60 sacks explicitly on the quarterback as the quarterback's fault, it's a fiction. It's an easy one. The offensive line has been brutal. Mark Potash, who covers the Chicago Sun-Times, posted a tweet after the Detroit Lions game that in Ryan Pohl's tenure as general manager, there have been 63 different offensive line combinations to start and play in a Chicago Bears game. That's a musical chairs unlike we've ever seen. And man, has the music been bumping this season for that offensive line. Each week it's somebody different. And it's hard to properly assess and grade Caleb Williams based on some of the offensive line play at times here. And we've seen it bleed into the running game. I'm not a big DeAndre Swift fan. I didn't like the signing at the time. He has slightly surprised me this season with, I think, some strong runs. He does have the opportunity to hit the home run. I'm not going to shy away from that. But the running game has not been able to get going. Partial to that is the offensive line. Caleb Williams at times is just trying to survive out there. And we've seen that from other past Bears quarterbacks. So the 60 sacks are explicitly Caleb's fault. That's a fiction. But there is some fact that a lot of it, a good portion of it, is something that Caleb can improve upon. But it's easier to improve in that category if the talent level in the offensive line is better. And the final one, Caleb's talent should be highly attractive to a prospective NFL head coach. This is our fact. This is one of the big facts. Not only financially because Caleb Williams is on a rookie contract, but all of the question marks in terms of off the field stuff. He's checked every box and in many ways pulled out a shovel and buried a lot of the things of bad teammate, diva. Is he a leader? I mean, I don't know if he's a leader on the team. It's hard to be a leader when you're 23 years old. I think actually the smart move is to not be a leader when you're 23 and a rookie. Try and maybe do it quietly and build some equity in that room, build some trust. And that's a problem with the Chicago Bears team is that there is an element of they are a little too young and they haven't been together long enough, and there really is no elder statesman that's been through enough pain that could stand up there and be a leader in the room. We want it to be Jalen Johnson or Cole Kmet. For whatever reason, it quite hasn't happened, and maybe it will over time as they get more experience experiencing the pain. But all that narrative stuff about Caleb this, Caleb that, diva, LA guy, USC, all that stuff, whatever you want to say, it's been unfounded. Dude works hard, shows up, says the right thing after games, does the best he can. And on the field, he's had some wonderful moments. Now, granted, a lot of them have been in garbage time. But I will tell you, for a rookie quarterback, I would rather have amazing throws and good plays and things to build off of heading into an offseason and garbage time than not at all. Bears fans, if he wasn't making those plays and was inept for 4 quarters, we'd be in a lot of trouble right now. And I get it, the first halves have been terrible. And as he moves through his career, he's going to have to figure out how to play consistently 4 quarters of good offensive football. Going to have to figure it out, or he won't be the guy. It's as simple as that. But the fact we get some moments and some plays from him Got to acknowledge it. And it's worth its weight in gold. And because of that factor, hopefully, it is highly attractive to an NFL coach. Whether it is door number 1, Ben Johnson, or door number 2, Mike Vrabel. Now, look, I'm team Mike Vrabel. I'm going to stay there for right now. I will say, watching the Detroit Lions and watching Ben Johnson dismantle us and in many ways embarrass us by running a stumble play just because the Packers accidentally stumbled and then came out with a huge productive play in this Bears defense. They tried to mimic that by having Jahmyr Gibbs fall down, and then they hit Amon-Ra St. Brown down the field. It's embarrassing. But Caleb Williams will be highly attractive to an offensive-minded head coach, defensive-minded head coach, and that is a fact. And he is one of the few selling points on this roster right now. So when we make these proclamations in the summer, when I say that he's going to have peaks and valleys, they're going to be ups and downs, I'm not just saying it for funsies. I'm saying it because I mean it. And this is exactly how this season has been. So I'm not going to freak out one way or the other just because I thought this was how this was going to go. There's going to be good moments. There's going to be bad moments. We're going to have to take them both in, objectively assess them, and try and eradicate the bad and accentuate the good. So I'm not bailing on Caleb Williams right now because a couple things didn't go our way and he didn't play great in the first half of a ton of games. I kind of figured this was going to be a part of the roller coaster. And I hope that next offseason, as we talk ourselves into 10 wins, 11 wins, like we're always going to do as Bears fans, that we keep in mind here the fact or fiction that we take into a season. We got to hold on to it, especially when the season can take you in so many different directions, especially the directions that this Bears season has taken us. I'm going to sign off here for the week here on WLS AM 890. You're listening to Sports Talk Chicago with Joey Christopoulos. If you are interested, you can follow me at Joey Sports Guy. You can follow us on socials at Sports Talk Shy, or check us out on YouTube if you want to see my face. I'm currently in Pittsburgh right now in a different setup, so forgive me, with a different microphone too as well, so hopefully it sounds good. Producer John Meadows. But thank you so much for tuning in. I'm going to leave you with this parting thing heading out of 2024, and I'll catch you on the flip-flop in 2025. I will tell you right now, just being in this industry, the sports media industry, and I'm grateful for the opportunity here with WLS AM 890. I will tell you this: viewership and support mean a lot to us, and I greatly appreciate it. And you have to understand something, that the way that some of these machinations move and shift and shake and shape the sports media landscape, it is more important than ever that the viewership and audience and people like you listening support and get involved in however you can. And I'm not asking for your money. Trust me. Don't need it right now. I mean, I always need it, but not from you guys. I'm not going to ask for that. What we do need, though, is the support of the community, because I will tell you something. There's a lot going on that gets baked into viewership and likes and support. And I will tell you this for those listening. Whether you love me, you like me, you don't like me. If you don't like me, I would hope that you can at least support the space for people to have sports voices in this city of Chicago. And hopefully those that have those sports voices can at least make a living. And you can disagree with us and you can curse at us online or call into the radio station and tell us that we're no good. And if you like us or love us, I will tell you that hitting like on a YouTube channel, following someone on a social media site, at least giving someone their viewership and giving that click or that view, it means more now than ever. Because a lot of this stuff comes down to things that are on a sheet of paper. And advertisers look at these numbers on a sheet of paper and then decide to allocate the dollars out to support any different kind of entity. And I would just impress upon you, this isn't so much about particular tastes or me going to bat for me or anything like that, but if you love sports and you love sports conversation, even if you don't like me, I would hope that you can still support people like me trying to have a conversation. Because if we're not careful, some of this stuff will go away. It will be marginalized. You will see less of it. And if you're not careful, the less that you get might be from voices that you don't appreciate or don't like. We need to continue to support the sports media community so that we can have it all. The ones that you love, the ones that you like, the ones that you don't like. The more voices, the better. Now, anyone can pick up a microphone and start a podcast. I totally get it. But you need to go out there and you need to support. It's important. And I hate to say it, this is the world we live in. There are people that want to financially support sports media entities and outlets, and they need to look at those likes or the follows or the viewership. I'm not happy about it, nor should you. But if you do support me, I would hope that instead of just watching a video or listening to our show, if you could take a couple seconds of your time to go out there and like something, follow at Sports Talk Shy, follow me at Joey Sports Guy, give a like on our YouTube video. I'll tell you, it does mean the world. It does make a difference. Every like counts. And I don't like it, but that's a bit of the way the industry is moving. And if you don't feel like doing that because you don't support me, go out there and find someone that you do support. Because the last thing that we need is to have more voices taken out of the business and the industry and continuously shaved down or marginalized. It's more perilous than you think. And I do appreciate everyone listening here on WLS AM 890 to me every single Saturday. I'll continue to try and give you the best content and guests that I possibly can. And I hope in turn I can earn the right to be proud to say that I've earned your support. That's going to do it here. I appreciate the time. I appreciate the listen. You were listening to Sports Talk Chicago here on WLS AM 890. I am Joey Christopoulos. Have a wonderful Saturday. 2024, it's in the books. I'll see you on the other side. I'll see you on the other side in 2025.